So that's what I'm saying. The text is like an object. It's gonna change perspective based on where you're standing. I don't know.
Hello?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I missed you, baby sweet. It was a day.
It was a day.
Please tell me you're seeing this too.
From Seattle, we're Drinking the Movies. I'm Taylor Baker.
And I'm Michael Clausen.
We're back this week with some new releases and a delicious Hell's Lager from Hellbent Brewing Company. What do you think about this beer, Michael?
Very tasty. Very refreshing. I dig it. Yourself?
I feel the opposite about it that I do about this week's new movie selections that we'll be discussing, which is to say, I love this beer.
Just a little hint at where we're going, but it's an eclectic lineup, we can say that much.
It sure is. We found a way to introduce The Night of the Hunter, a classic film we've always wanted to see, with some new releases called Valley Girl and Capone. But first, as always, we have first impressions. We're starting with Judd Apatow's King of Staten Island.
Let's do it.
I like your tattoos. What are those numbers on your arm?
Oh, that's the date my dad died. He was a fireman. Died in a fire 17 years ago.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Don't be. It's fine.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Not your dad.
Push a bit, little bit, roll it up, take a hit.
You can't focus on Scott anymore, honey. He's 24 years old, Marjorie. Let that fucking bird fly, please.
Don't worry, Mom. I know your daughter got smart and went to college and abandoned us. But I'm still here. I'm gonna be here forever.
Yeah. I've been dating someone for a little while now.
The first guy you date in 17 years is a fireman, just like that? You don't think that's weird?
You're gonna have to pull your weight a little more around here. Maybe help Ray get his kids to school.
Kelly, do you know him?
He's a new friend.
You okay? You know, you could tell me.
I'm okay.
Oh, I trained her in the car. She's not gonna break.
All right, Michael. That was Judd Apatow's The King of Staten Island, starring Pete Davidson. What do you think?
Well, it does really feel like a Judd Apatow comedy, especially with Pete Davidson's character kind of filling that man-child kind of role. A guy who...
or entirely?
Yeah, somewhere in the middle there. A guy who has some growing up to do, immature to some extent, still living at home with his mom, but it's also where the pathos kind of lies. I'm kind of skeptical about Pete Davidson's ability as a leading man. I don't know that I don't know that I find him terribly promising, but will withhold judgment, I guess. What about you?
Yeah, I'm lined up there. I don't know how I feel about him as a leading man is a very good way of putting him. I do like some of his characters. I always have. He can get me to chuckle bare minimum off of doing stupid things, which I find, valuable at some level. When I want to laugh, he can get someone to laugh, especially by addressing how difficult it's going to be to make someone laugh and then doing a character. I think the background players, Marissa Tomei, Bill Burr, that's bringing a lot of juice for me. Specifically Bill Burr, he doesn't normally act in film, and this is something that I'm very interested in seeing his comedic arc on, and I'd like to see him do a little bit more feature work or become more of a supporting player in limited series or television series moving forward. So that's a little bit more where my head is at. But I'm absolutely willing to give this VOD June 12th release a shot.
Yeah, on the topic of supporting characters, I like the sister as well. I'm a big fan of Belle Powley. I feel like she still hasn't
That's not
gotten...
the sister, that's the girlfriend, I believe. The
think that's the
sister,
girlfriend?
I believe, is Judd Apatow's daughter.
Ah, got it. I like her a lot. I feel like she still hasn't quite gotten her big break.
Well, you gave her some pretty big acclaim in our White Boy Rick review.
Absolutely. Yeah, I thought she was great there. It was, another supporting role. Yeah, strong cast.
I would agree. Belle Powley is always interesting to see what she's going to do. On to Elizabeth Moss feature Shirley.
to our suffering, my dear.
There's not enough scotch in the world for that.
Shirley, what are you writing now?
A little novella. I'm calling none of your goddamn business.
Well, you were invited to stay here for a few days until we could find a place.
Shirley has these bouts.
She's gone sick in the head. I read your story. What are you doing in here? It made me feel thrillingly horrible. Do you know what it's like to have a secret?
All right, we just watched the trailer for Josephine Decker's Shirley. What do you think?
You know, I genuinely don't know. I was pretty strongly against the Invisible Man trailer. I completely shifted around watching that film, which starred Elizabeth Moss, and I felt very foolish for doubting it. So I don't want to repeat past mistakes, but a lot of the language that was being quoted is the same exact language I saw quoted for Madeline's Madeline, which I was positive on just barely. I don't see that much that makes me think this is a different change of pace. There were a lot of car sequences that I remember pretty distinctly in Madeline's Madeline. There seems to be the same reach there, where they use that to deliver, or she used it to deliver basically essential plot dialogue in a way that seemed to fit the narrative and not feel forced. But I love Stuhlbarg. I love Moss. You pointed out Logan Lerman, who played Percy Jackson in the brief attempt at making those novels into films. So I'm very interested. I'm absolutely willing to watch it, but a little bit lukewarm on if this is going to be anything new or just a rehash of what I saw Decker do with Madeline's Madeline. How about you?
I think I'm much more interested in this than it sounds like you are. When you said language, were you talking about the marketing plugs or like
yes.
the actual... Okay, got it. Not the language.
No, the specific plugs that are quoted in that white text are exactly what I saw for Madeline's Madeline.
Got it.
Which I believe was marketed by Oscilloscope, and this one's Neon, which is a little bit more... That signals to me that this might be a little bit more commercial appeal.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, just the fact that this is about a real person, a writer, and yet the trailer doesn't say biopic to me and says, like, psychological thriller, I think is exciting. And I don't know why I had... imagine something that just felt more explicitly literary, and that's just not what this feels like to me. It does feel more distinctively cinematic, and I would agree. I think stylistically it does resemble Madeline's Madeline. I remember the shallow focus so clearly from that movie. It seems like we're getting a lot of that as sort of this expression of somebody's losing their grip on reality. Yeah, and I wasn't, hugely positive on that movie either, but it still felt like a really personal voice and distinctive, if nothing else. And with someone like Moss leading the charge here, I think that sounds super promising. I'm excited.
Yeah, I guess the one thing that I would say is when you say distinctive, I in this case worry about the word rut, R-U-T, where someone can't not do the same thing over again. And that's what I'm worried about. This seems to... I don't know if you remember the narrative beats of Madeline's Madeline, but there was like the party where there's a social gathering, there's like a quiet explosion that where not everybody becomes aware of like the devolving situation, and then there's later the big dance sequence where like everything gets voiced and there's a more explosive thing. I was getting the sense that this is going to repeat those plot beats, and that stuff for me as someone who just looks at film a little bit more story centric, I don't like watching someone tell the same story, or tell a different story using the same exact pattern of telling a story, and that's what I'm worried about based on what I saw in the trailer. But I also liked the cinematic language that I saw. So
yeah, I mean, I think there is a fine line between repeating old tricks and just refining your stamp. I mean, I think I maybe lean towards the latter here, which I look at that and looks to me like, oh, it's a Josephine Decker movie. To me, that's a good thing. But
this
yeah,
could, I agree that it could be a good thing. I guess we'll find out June 5th I lean towards a Josephine Decker film being a good thing, or me going, I already know what I'm getting.
Yeah.
Which
if you don't like what a Josephine Decker movie is, that's a problem. But
kind of like an Apatow movie. You know you're getting a man-child.
Yeah, it makes me curious to go back and see the ones just before Madeline's Madeline, because that was about multiple things, but part of that was about creative types and kind of an artistic process, and a teacher telling one of her students stories in a way. And this one's also about a writer, so I think just the thematic continuation of looking at artists, I think, is kind of cool as sort of a thing she does. Yeah, just worth. I'd be curious to see if that was a thing in her earlier works or not.
Maybe we'll get to it. It hits VOD on June 5th.
Real movies actually coming out in some way, shape, or form.
I don't know how, I don't know why, but I'll take it. On to Valley Girl.
Hey, come on, just tell me what happened tonight.
Zach and I broke up.
Oh my God, sweetie, I'm
No,
so
don't do any of that. We just have no idea what I'm going through.
You'd be surprised. I'll tell you a story.
See the people walking down the street. They don't know where they want to go, but they're walking in time.
Stop. You were singing and dancing on a fountain.
That's how I remember it.
Go-go music really makes us dance.
Where should we go now? We go over the hill.
To Hollywood.
Valley Girl is directed by Rachel Lee Goldenberg. It is a jukebox musical, a phrase that I was not familiar with before watching this movie, but I do find is a useful term.
A phrase that I did not know until right now, but I wholeheartedly agree, do not know the definition, and find useful.
It was not until I went to rent this movie that I saw the phrase jukebox musical, and I thought, what is that? But it's just like a Mamma Mia or something where all of the songs sung are covers, essentially.
I've also not seen Mamma Mia, so.
Gotcha. Yeah, that is literally the only other example I can think of off the top of my head. But yeah, musicals where all of the music is not original, apparently.
Okay.
I like that phrase.
I
like
do
that
too.
phrase more than I think what it actually means.
I don't mind it, and I didn't mind this movie, as you did. I'm not positive on it. I'm the lowest mixed you can be. According to Letterboxd, this is a 2.5. I did a bunch of math and basically ended up between a 46 and a 48 on it, which means, an F in school grades, but according to Letterboxd, that's like a C. I think when we see a 2.5, we think C, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, 2.5. I mean, that's an F, right? Isn't half?
Yeah, according
50
to
out of 100?
grades. According to grades, but
Yeah.
I think amongst folks that look at ratings, 2.5 out of 5 is not an F. I think 0 out of 5 we interpret as an F, right? You know what I mean? The difference there.
Yeah, I do. I mean, when I step back and think about my ratings, just like more knee-jerk reaction, if it is a 2.5 or below, like, the fact of the matter is, like, I probably just didn't like it very much. Like, it feels more close. It feels closer to a failure than it does like true mixed, where actually I can be kind of mixed in the 3.5 range, and it's really like 4 and above is where I genuinely connect with something.
Okay, that's just another evidence of where we differ.
Yeah, worth calling out. But yeah, I did effectively get nothing out of this movie. I wouldn't say I hated it. That's a strong word. I think it's competent, but to me that only made it a little more boring, to be honest. Sometimes things that are a little more scrappy can actually be kind of interesting and have its charm. But yeah, it's a musical with sort of this framing device, right, where a mother is telling her teenage daughter about her experience as a teen living in the valley, San Fernando Valley, and falling in love with a boy from Hollywood. Kind of a story of lovers from opposite sides of the track, right? Yeah, so you were charmed by the musical form here?
Charmed. Boy, that's distinctive language, and I would not use the word charmed. I would use the word pleasant. I had a pleasant time. I went in with the expectation of very bad. And Jessica Roth goes a long way towards creating mood for me. Judy Greer is a treasure, and she always makes me laugh. And I guess lean in. She just has the effect of where I lean into the narrative a little bit more, even in something like Arrested Development. Whenever she's present, she just makes me lean further into believing the narrative, which I think is a charming feature that she has. Yeah, it was fine. I would never go to bat for it, but I had a fine time. It's like cooking a box of macaroni and cheese and not messing it up. You know, you're like, this is exactly what I expected, and I didn't mess it up. Great.
Yeah. Yeah, the expectations are very different. I think I did have higher expectations than you. I was surprised to hear you say that you thought it would just be straight bad. I somehow was under the impression that it would be funnier, probably just because it had Jessica Roth in it.
Mm-hmm.
I associate her with funny stuff. So I did expect to find it more enjoyable than I did. And I mean, I could use words that I feel like sound really obvious to describe it as just kind of hackneyed or cliche or corny, which I think the movie tries to defend itself from those words by saying that that's all kind of intentional.
Yeah, I didn't get defensive posturing, but I guess you could say that.
Yeah, I get the sense that when in this framing device, the mom says something to the effect of, well, that's how I remember it. To the daughter, that this is sort of, supposed to be a bright memory of the 80s, which just is the most basic commonplace understanding of how pop culture remembers the 80s as like bright colors and songs. Like I don't need that in a movie. Like that just fails to justify the movie's existence.
Yeah, I mean, just to bear in a little bit more, this is, number one, a remake of a film from the 80s, I believe,
which
starring
I was not
Nick
aware
Cage,
of,
which I didn't know until it was over.
Okay.
Additionally, I hated about half the numbers and had a good time with half the numbers. And if you look at the cover art, whoever's listening, you'll begin to see why I thought maybe this movie was going to be trash. A movie that comes out with cover art that looks like that tells me the marketing budget was negligible. I didn't see this marketed. We had to look up new trailers in order to even hear about this movie. Anything that goes that far under the radar, I always have a feeling is going to be terrible. And when it's not terrible and I find, I guess, promising talent, that can kind of win me over. I saw a lot of performers, especially the friends of Jessica Roth in this piece, that I think are going to go on to have very interesting careers in front of the camera. I saw a lot of talent there that was being developed, and sometimes that's all you want to see. It's like watching a really bad football game where there's a lot of prospects. There's a lot of prospects in this movie, and that can go a long way for someone like me.
Yeah, I would agree. I think some of the friends are kind of funny. I think there are also some atrocious supporting characters, particularly the boyfriend character to Jessica Roth's
Logan Paul?
character. Logan Paul, correct. Yeah, just it's just insulting, I think, to be honest.
To him or
to us to have to watch it. I think it's very bad.
Oh, I thought it was very self-aware of that, which didn't rub me too poor. Like, I do not like that person very much, and I don't really know who he is. I just don't like that style of celebrity, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But in, embracing the fact that people don't like you, it can be charming. Pete Davidson's done it sometimes in a charming way, and then other times it really doesn't work. Also, you could reference Pete Davidson doing that there too. And this one worked half the time for me, where I was just like, he knows that he's a douchebag jumping into a Jeep. This is fine. It wasn't good. It wasn't bad to me. It was just like, who else did I want there? Someone I didn't recognize?
Just a good actor, though. Like, I'm always just going to value, like, just normally good talent.
Yeah. I think I was embracing more of the embellished storytelling narrative. So, like, him sticking out and being the bad ex-boyfriend, who's also a bad actor, fit this storytelling narrative in my head, which might not make any sense for anyone else. But I was just like, of course she's going to remember him as, like, this terrible actor who looks preposterous in something like this because that's her ex-boyfriend and she's the one telling the story.
Yeah, that's fair. I can appreciate that reading for sure.
You just didn't get to have it yourself.
Correct. Yeah, I mean the numbers, the music is fine, I guess. I just don't really find much cinematic value in it. Like, it feels obviously derivative and intentionally so, and the fact that it's purposeful is only sort of like, that only makes it kind of worse in my opinion. Like, it seems so willfully uninventive, which is just very frustrating. And I don't think I enjoyed Jessica Roth here. I think it's kind of embarrassing to have to watch her not really deliver any of the goods we know she has. I think that's just kind of painful. I really thought that she might have some opportunity to be funny, but I don't think it's there.
Okay, that's where I disagree. I think that she's the only thing that keeps it on track. I think her infectious smile and willingness to act as if this movie is not bad is the only thing that carries any semblance of allowing me to believe that it's not bad for any stretch of time. She's the entire reason it makes it work, right? Because we go from her being in preposterously high heels to doing a musical where she's running across car tops in flats and then back into the high heels as soon as she's on pavement. Like, there's a lot of problems with this movie. And she smiles and sings and acts like none of the bad stuff is happening. And I saw immeasurable talent there to just take this thing seriously until the end.
Yeah, I can appreciate her taking it in stride, I guess, but I think what the movie asks of her is disappointing. To just see the same kind of one-note, starry-eyed look and the same smile, which is a great smile. I don't mind that smile, but to kind of see this dynamic repeated between her and this boy she likes, I think is just kind of just painfully cliche.
I think that we might be at the same juncture here, just you're interpreting the movie as being responsible for that, and that's where I'm at with her whole career. I'm just so tired of her not being able to have her range. Like, she has range, and all of her projects have this problem. I would not single this one out. I would say all of her projects, every single one.
Yeah, I like her best in Happy Death Day, far and away, but I don't even remember her in La La Land, as we've discussed.
Yes.
What else has she been in? Is there something I may be forgetting while we just talk about Jessica Roth for a moment?
Happy Death Day to You, the second one, obviously.
Yeah.
Which was more lackluster. But there was a picture she did that I watched that I know that almost nobody else did. And that was called Tater Tot and Patton. And that was an independent feature-length film where she basically goes and stays with her uncle, as far as I remember it, to learn or she gets in trouble and has to grow up, and her parents send her to go live with her uncle for a summer. And that was one of the most like traumatic roles she had, where she like had to mature over a period of time with the character, shift perspective, become an adult, have a romantic relationship that then ends. And I actually really enjoyed that, but I watched it as a character study for her talent, not as something to enjoy as a film, but as something to watch a prospect develop. And so it's hard to be objective when you really like a talent and you just want to go back and watch them develop. And that's just, I was reflecting on Rooney Mara's ascent, and I was looking into her and also Florence Pugh at the time. just to see how they developed. And I believe Emily Blunt. I did Sunshine Cleaning and that type of stuff at that time.
Yeah. I kind of think of her in the same vein as I think of Zoe Deutsch, as another sort of rising comedian who I think is maybe yet to have landed a just kind of top tier role.
Yeah,
I think they're both really funny, charming, pleasant actresses that just they kind of feel somewhat old fashioned to me in sort of their comic sensibilities. Actually, maybe I can't take that back. I don't know what it is that they seem to share that I find promising and exciting.
I think they're both up and coming talents that seem to have similar draws for casting demographic. But if I was to comp who I think they could become if they're given the opportunities, I think Deutsch is someone who I look at a little bit more dramatically and see more of a Anne Hathaway potentiality in her outcome variables, because Anne has a great comedic role, but she can also just rock a scene and know that she's playing herself in the scene, which makes it funnier. And I get the sense from Deutsch that she has that confidence to do that. Whereas for Roth, my personal comp is more of a Rachel McAdams, someone who's always going to contribute something significant, whether it's Spotlight or The Notebook or Game Night. A huge range, someone who's a little bit underappreciated, but can really carry something or bring it to the next level. Yeah, she is definitely what brought me to this movie. I don't think we would have watched this had this not had Jessica Roth. That's safe to say? We would not have watched this if there was not a closure of all theaters, a basically non-existent amount of new releases, and Jessica Roth in this. Jessica Roth being in it is definitely the reason we watched it, but there's a lot of preliminary things that led to this outcome this week. And it was a little bit of a mistake. Do you have anything nice to say about it besides anything that we've already said? I mean, I think the construction is fine. I mean, I don't think the aesthetics really appeal to me that much. I did find it mostly charmless. I think it is fine. It's just not the kind of thing that I find much value in. But for the lovers of movies like Mamma Mia, who just enjoy cheery covers, like, if that's for you, then do it. Like, that is what it is. That's true. Not my thing. Yeah. Yeah. I would agree. It's fine as far as things that are fine go in this genre. I guess I would say that the direction never rang bad, based on my impression of the limited assets and budget that they had. So I would be interested to see if this director could attach herself to a streaming giant and direct some middle ground content, the third P.S. I Love You to All the Boys, or whatever those movies are, the Christmas Prince, that type of stuff. I do think that with some opportunity to develop in the modern studio system of streaming, she could be a very interesting talent once she has some films behind her and maybe knows how she wants to tell stories more. I would agree. I think the ability to deliver a product is there. I may be reluctant to say that I have identified any new personality here, but yes, but there's a lot of reasons for why that could be. So I'll take the most charitable interpretation here. Let's try to do our best in charitable interpretation of Josh Trank's Fonzo, which has been retitled Capone, released by Redbox.
How about it for our good friend Al, ladies and gentlemen?
Do you know what the difference is between Adolf Hitler and Al Capone? Hitler's dead. Capone lives like a king in Florida.
He has full-blown dementia.
I have reason to believe it could all be an elaborate act.
What's this about?
We have information that your client may have tucked away a very large sum of money
can drop the act now.
You got goons walking around.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen anything actually released by Redbox. I was surprised when I saw that logo ahead of the credits.
I believe I've seen one, but I do not recall what that title was. I don't remember if Seven Psychopaths was a Redbox title when they first began distributing content. Oh, we did see one. We saw one together. We saw that Movie Pass Redbox one together. Gosh, what was that called? American Animals, right?
Oh, I remember that movie.
Yes.
Redbox Movie Pass, yeah.
Yeah, I believe that
combo.
Movie Pass and Redbox co-financed that film. I might be wrong there, but I believe that was my understanding. This is a film from Josh Trank. This is his third feature film. You've never seen any of his feature films, and you've definitely not seen his one good feature film, which was Chronicle. What mouth noises would you like to make about this entry, or would you rather have diarrhea?
Well, I was never all that keen on checking out the previous features, Chronicle or Fantastic Four, and I don't think after Capone I will be keen on seeing what he does next. I did not care for this movie. I was entertained enough by it at certain points. I think he does have some, at least, cinematic efforts here that I appreciate. But by and large, I did not care for this movie. What about you?
Yeah, I think your ending couple words there really summed it up. I did not care for this movie. I did not. That's my room impression. I would like to say that I just did not like this movie. I did not. And throw the water bottle.
Fair enough. I was a little just disappointed because I felt like the subject matter did have potential.
I still think it does.
Yeah, I think, just to throw out, one of the greats names, like, it's the kind of movie that I think Martin Scorsese could direct, like, blindfolded with his shoes tied. Like, this just has certain directors, like name
he could direct it from a hospital bed.
100%. This is about Al Capone in the final days of his life when his health is deteriorating. He's kind of losing his mind, and he's
and his bowels.
And what?
His bowels.
On multiple occasions, while still being encircled by the FBI and people who he can no longer trust to some extent. But yeah, I just felt like there was actually a lot of potential here to explore interesting things like personal legacy, regret, Capone's history, mortality, and I don't think Trank has any real perspective on the story or like any clear sense of what kind of theme he wants to investigate here. So really just kind of disappointing that I think this like had potential to be good or worthwhile, at least.
I don't know. I feel like the premise does. I genuinely don't know if I saw anything in this movie that made me think that about this project from this director, though.
I think the direction is where this falls apart, for sure. As well as the lead performance.
I think the screenplay also, because the screenplay encompasses what is directed from, and it was written by him as well. This is one of the big misses for me on Tom Hardy's career. I'm just going to say that I appreciate the effort that he must have put in for this character work, but I would have rather had Taboo Season 2 and just avoided this. It was, like, the dream sequences in it, a fucking nightmare to watch. Like, I did not enjoy watching it at all. I was watching it with a friend. At one point, I cannot see color. At one point I asked, is the color grading off? Why does everything just look wrong? And it took him a minute, and he was like, yeah, like, I don't know what it is, but something just doesn't look right. And when someone who doesn't watch as much cinema as I watch can at least see that something doesn't look right, and I can tell that there's something wrong, I believe, with the color grading. I don't know. Can you shed any light on that? Did the movie just look flat out wrong to you, or poorly lit, or incorrectly lit, or something?
Yeah, it's not a good looking movie. I would certainly agree with that. I don't think aesthetically there's much pleasant here, whether it's like cinematography, set design, or just how this character is like physically shaped. I think it is mostly misjudged.
I mean, it physically looks off, but that point you make about the main character, I do think that Tom Hardy just didn't look right, and I'm not for, like, sticking true to all casting decisions forever. Like, I don't care if Idris Elba plays 007. In fact, I actually do care, and I'm very excited at that prospect. Too bad it's over. I just don't care. I do think that he doesn't look anything like me imagining Al Capone.
Oh, for sure.
And that makes it very hard to suspend any level of disbelief, and it's exacerbated when the film is bad, and when the suits don't look right, and when the period looks incorrect, and when the Art Deco or the statues look like they're made out of stucco. Like, there's
it's all
so
very cheap looking.
much that is cheap and artifice, and that could be a really interesting artistic purpose to use, I guess, but it just doesn't hold any water. Like, this movie just doesn't work on so many levels, and the deepest level that it messes up on is doing dream sequences.
Yeah, I actually think that's the only thing that kept me going. Was just that it felt like he at least had the guts to do something a little weird, a little different. I kind of thought to myself, well, at least this is kind of unexpected, because I literally thought we might just be watching Tom Hardy sit around and drool and gurgle and just die without like us feeling any real sympathy, because it's kind of unable to cultivate much feeling. I actually thought that, like, at least that kept this from being boring for me. That's what really gets me down to, like, the lowest tiers of stuff, is where, like, I either just have a distaste for the project, or, like, just am feeling nothing. At least I was kind of, like, diverted enough.
So my personal feelings on that are, if we didn't have all the dream sequences, then he would have had to do something else with that time. And by doing something else, he may have created any narrative thread for me to follow at all that could have any legitimacy to the actual real-life narrative. Instead, nothing has any legitimacy really at all. The most interesting scene for me is Neil Brennan's lawyer scene. And half of that was just because I got to see Neil Brennan earn a paycheck sitting next to Tom Hardy.
Who is Neil? Oh, it's Hardy's lawyer, or Capone's lawyer.
Yeah, he's also the co-creator of The Chappelle Show, and he has a great stand-up comedy on Netflix called Three Mics. He's a great distinctive comedic voice that I've always really enjoyed as a person, and his scene was like I mean, when Linda Cardellini doesn't make your movie better and makes you realize that the movie is actually, like, bad because she's not able to make it better, that's a problem. She always makes things better. Look at Green Book. She's the reason that thing
Never
works.
Even saw Green Book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Without her, it doesn't even work as a film.
Yeah, I would agree. Big letdown to underuse Linda Cardellini. I think the essence of the issue for me was one of kind of just competing impulses, where on one hand, this seems to want to find some kind of comic touch in this sort of cartoonish character and the deterioration of his body, and this impulse to find sadness in it. And I think those two impulses kind of just wind up negating each other, and you really just don't feel anything. Or I did not. I think that's a great point,
and I think that the scene that really embraces every point you just made is the Thanksgiving dinner scene, right? Where it attempts to make a joke while also being heartbreaking, and neither of those things happen at the same time. Neither of those things happen, and I feel like in, as you said, Scorsese, but I just can't imagine any of our great directors messing up that type of a tone. Like they'd either make it funny and sad, or just sad how hard he's trying to be funny, which ends up being funny, or it's so funny how sad it is. Like there's so many different directions. And I mean, I know I'm thinking of top tier talent. Like the first thing that comes to my mind is someone like Cuarón after Scorsese, right? But I do think this is the wrong story for Trank to try to come back with. And I don't think that Hardy was the right choice for casting. I think that I'd rather go with more of a no-name talent who's really Italian and maybe has legitimate weight in his cheeks, so that I could believe that this is Capone. And I just never could. I never saw anything besides Tom Hardy doing a character study at Harvard, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, I thought of Scorsese specifically just because it's in the gangster genre, and it's Irishman-esque in focusing on an aging gangster in sort of the last days, of his life. Irishman obviously tells that arc. It goes back, but it does the reverse. Here we have the young actor being aged up, and we saw De Niro being aged down, which I think is just kind of funny. And I don't think, the aging stuff in Irishman was always terribly persuasive. Sometimes, especially like the very first shot, you're like, that's a little funky. So even if
I don't think Hardy was aged up that much, though, right? Wasn't he born in like 1899, or am I wrong? Capone.
You're right. I was shocked to learn how young he actually. He
died in 47,
because of
right?
How they make him look.
Yeah, I think he died in 47, and I thought he was born in 1899. I might be wrong there.
Yeah.
So it was like a 12-year jump at the most, I think, for Hardy.
Yeah.
But then you think of, like, if I asked you to think about modern masters, or at least ascending talents, if I said, imagine Eggers, imagine Astor, imagine Schultz, this movie's just better with all of them, right? Or the Derek Cianfrance, right? Like, what he would do with the movie like this, I would just be so enraptured by those artistic choices, at least abstractly. It's interesting how bad this movie is and how much potential it had, but how much vision it lacks.
100%. It lacks vision. Yeah, I would not disagree with that. Just there's no angle to it thematically, and it just feels like a bummer because I think it could have been good in the right hands.
Yeah,
these are not them.
Do you think there's anything that you'd like to try to compliment about Trank? Like, do you think that there's any way that he can move forward?
I mean, I'd still like its willingness to just get a little weird with things. Like, I actually don't mind that. Like, watching Hardy at the end, pull out the golden machine gun and mow people down. Like, at least it felt a little bold. That still feels like a little generous. But it still feels like it kind of went for something, and it just didn't really find the story it wanted to tell within it. But
so would you equivocate that to, like, you're interested in seeing him develop as a screenwriter? Like, if you had to try to make a case for him to make a path forward working with cinema, where do you see him having the most opportunity, or like the most strength already that you think that he should develop?
I don't know that I really feel comfortable prognosticating after only one movie. I think when in doubt in those situations, I just say, like, try to make something more personal. This doesn't really seem to have just the mark of a distinctive personality, Yeah,
I got the sense that he didn't kill any darlings in it. And so I'd actually take the opposite approach, where it's like, you've clearly just been making things that are way too precious, and that worked with your debut, but it hasn't worked since. So I would actually recommend, like, the Steven Soderbergh route, like, go work as a gun for hire as a cinematographer, like, really learn what it's like to shoot film after film or show after show, and master those shots and feel what they mean. Maybe try, like Soderbergh does, doing the editing of those films as well, or a series. Like, really get a feel for your shots and your editing, so that when you go back to write, you can visually see what these shots are going to be like, because there's just a lot of, there's so much a lack of tone management that I don't even know that I could tell him to work on tone management. I feel like you have to work from the foundation up based on what I saw, because there's certainly promise, but it just is there's a lot of blundering.
Yeah. I think I'm more inclined to only respond rather than recommend at this point, and just I will take it one movie at a time.
We'll see if you take any more movies, to be honest. But let's get on to the great American novel adapted to cinema itself, The Night of the Hunter.
Ben never told you throw it in the river, did he?
I can hear you whispering, children, so I know you're down there. I can feel myself getting awful mad.
Here is all the passion and suspense, the heart-pounding warmth of the best-selling novel that gripped millions.
Pearl, wake up! Come on, Pearl!
Superb, unforgettable performances by an extraordinary array of talent.
Figured I was gone, huh?
Run, hide in the staircase. Run quick! Ruby, get! What do you want?
I want them kids.
All right, Michael. At the end of this conversation, I will actually ask you what your favorite scene was. I didn't before because those movies were not worthy of that question.
That's not fair. There are too many good ones in this movie. I was already dreading that question.
You'll have plenty of time to think about it. So, The Night of the Hunter is a, I guess you would say, American crime film. To me, it's the equivalent of the Great American Novel depicted on screen. I'm not as positive on it as you, but I think historically, this is one of those weird movies where it's not a 5 to me, but if I was going to recommend 100 movies, this would probably end up in that list. So, like, quote unquote, objectively, it feels like a 5. Personally, it's somewhere between a 4 and a 4.5.
Wow.
There's just a little bit that doesn't make it perfect for me. And none of that has to do with it. It just has to do with my sensibilities.
Fair enough. This was no doubt 5 out of 5 for me. I love this movie. I thought it was just a pure masterpiece of expressive form. I thought this was just an incredibly effective movie and feeling so surreal and dreamlike and just stunning in its visual realization. I'll be very curious to hear where this did not work for you. I have to think that just in terms of like the craft, you responded well, but maybe narratively less so.
No, I mean, like I said, it's more about my sensibilities. And when I say sensibilities, I mean, it's that gut check thing where Waves is a 5. I'll die on that cross. It's a 5. Put me on the hill, bury me in the water. I don't care. Waves is a perfect movie. Climax is a perfect movie. This, for me, is not that movie that sings me electric. You know, like it. I really responded to it. I think I saw a lot of the adaptiveness from German Expressionism a few years to decades earlier really come through here. Saw a lot of Nosferatu queued up style of lighting that I really responded to. I loved the black shadow against the night sky when they're being dragged in the boat by that wire that you can clearly see in one of the shots, which makes it more charming, kind of like when we watched those 2 films from
Houston?
No, the 2 films that we watched, Steel Helmet and
Fuller.
Naked Kiss. Fuller, Samuel Fuller. This really reminded me of the charm of Samuel Fuller. There's just something that doesn't resonate with me, I guess. It didn't feel personal to me. Like, recommending this movie isn't a personal thing for me. It's more of a scholarly piece. It doesn't find its way into my heart as part of my identity. And sometimes that's the difference between a 5 and a 4.5.
Yeah, just didn't quite get there. That's fair.
But it's a freaking fantastic film. 1955, it's one of the best looking films. It's one of the best novel adaptations I've ever seen. Like there's so much quality to it. I can't believe it's a directorial debut. It will go down as one of the best of all time. Robert Mitchum is iconic, memorable, distinctive, statuesque, all those great words that you want out of your leading man in a adaptation of the great American novel.
Yeah. Completely agreed on those fronts. One thing that just struck me as interesting was that I had, over time heard this sometimes talked about in the context of film noir. It does kind of center on a crime.
I have too.
It has the light and shadow that you kind of associate with film noir. And it is not the kind of film that I think of when I think of film noir. I just do tend to think of those more urban set kinds of stories,
Smoky.
crime stories. Yeah.
There's not much smoke here.
Well, I would have said there was a lot of fog. I mean, I think the
There is
atmosphere
fog,
is
but
there,
I mean
sure.
smoke. To me, noir is literal smoking, or smoke stacks on boats or in the city, and the lack of actual smoke to me, like you said, urban environment.
Yeah. And I think there are plenty of noirs set in the country and set in the daytime and stuff. But, I think one of the qualities of film noir can be some dreamlike qualities. It is sort of where realism meets that expressionism, right? That you get in the light and shadow. But what's also so distinctive about film noir to me is moral ambiguity. Like we're on the side of the criminals usually, or often. And we're having anti-heroes and people that we can maybe sympathize with even though they're criminals. But here, the dichotomy is so literally black and white between good and evil. There is nothing sympathetic about Robert Mitchum's character. It's just interesting to me how this fits in any conversation of film noir, because that dichotomy seems like what part of the essence of this movie is. While stylistically, I get the connection.
Yeah, I would say first that this reminds me most of German Expressionism, specifically when he approaches the first night. I believe it's the first night, and the boy is standing up talking, and all of a sudden his hat and his head are through the window and just plastered on him. There's just certain visuals here that speak volume. I guess by the end it was hitting me over the head a little bit with its message, which might be one of the things that I didn't care for. It's a particularly faith-riddled book, it appears, and film. Our Christian preacher impersonator here is the evil character who has the tattoos of love and hate, and he's always telling the story about love conquering hate, and then he ends up being the hate that is conquered. That was a little bit too charming for me, I guess. That ending, it was a little bit too over the head with its message, and maybe that specific event is where I just get a little bit off. What I really responded well to was when I was in the boat with the kids, and they get out, and she's got the switch, and she's chasing them up, and it's just another adult who's a villain or who can't help them. And that's when I was really enjoying this film, was when they were on their boat ride.
Yeah.
And dealing with the drunk uncle.
Yeah, to me, that's where it really went up a notch in terms of its dreamlike quality, because it's so quick once they take off in the boat that Pearl starts singing, I think, and we're getting those shots of the animals and the starry sky. And
I think those are used to make soup.
Is that what she says?
No, that's what the boy says when we see the turtle.
Oh, right.
But I don't know how to get it open.
Yeah. It certainly has this sense of wonder that up until that point, it certainly just felt more like horror, where that sort of moves from nightmare into fairy tale. I think is just sort of a incredible transition. just so kind of wonderfully surprising. So yeah, that worked for me as well, for sure. I like the music as well. I think the score is great.
I would agree.
Very much adds to the atmosphere. What else? This thread of the misogyny in him, I thought was interesting in knowing that this will be remade at some point, right? I think Universal.
Oh, really?
I think Universal said they were within the last 6 months that they were going to remake Night of the Hunter.
That's terribly disappointing.
Terrible idea. Terrible.
I'm going to say right now that I'm not going to watch it, and then they're going to attach a director I love. So
like, damn it.
I'm not going to watch it unless it's a director I love.
Yeah, I thought to myself that I could imagine that being the angle that a 2020 or 2021 film leans into.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could do a completely urban update and like use a car ride instead of a boat, but this is just such a singular piece of American film history. It's not like Scarface, where the better version was a remake from Brian De Palma. According to consensus, I don't like that film personally. And then remake it a third time, which Universal just announced recently. This is a movie that I just don't feel like belongs in that it's like Rope or Vertigo. Like, what do you mean remake? That's not Birds. You don't remake Birds. You don't remake gosh, what's the Orson Welles film that I'm forgetting now? Citizen Kane, right? You don't remake that.
Yeah. To me, I've always thought that the remake thing is backwards, where they remake the great movies. It's like, why not remake the movies that were like so and make them great? Like,
or like bad horror movies that have great followings.
Yeah. To me, it's like the things that were missed opportunities where something didn't quite work. Like, try it again. Do it differently. Yeah. Leave the good ones alone.
Exactly.
It's painful.
Anyways, back to this particular film. I guess, how do you feel about the first quarter to first half of the film in which everyone is still alive and everything is unfolding, right? Because that last portion is just so quick and you're so far in that feels like a perfect part of a film. If I had to pick like perfect parts of something, that's one of them, right? The chase sequence, when they're transporting the Joker, I guess, or transporting Harvey Dent, would be like the second one from The Dark Knight, right? The shootout from Heat, or like, these are considered perfect cinematic moments. I do think the entire second half of this film almost is a perfect cinematic like through line. But that first half, I'm a little bit more undecided on.
Oh, I think it's brilliant that we meet him so fast, and within minutes we're hearing him talk about the like 10 to 15 widows he's murdered for their money, and he so quickly establishes himself as completely deranged by religious belief, which just sets the foundation for the terror that are coming for these kids, and that just feels like the monster that will just haunt their nightmares, and that's what this feels like. I like that it establishes very quickly what the threat is, because I think it just makes it that much more chilling. What about you? Yeah,
I think I agree with what you're saying. I guess where I experienced a little bit more questioning, not derisive or negative or anything, just like, I don't know how I feel about the briefness of the jail sequence, or how instantaneously he appears. Like, I don't know if I would have preferred a little bit along the way there, just to make me. I guess the thing is that I was never on his side at all, even a little bit, and I think that maybe I would have had a possibly enhanced experience if there was a little bit more, particularly in that first thread.
I could see that. It does move fairly quickly, from introducing us to him through him getting picked up, through to jail, then him being on his way to the town. It is a snappy first act, I guess.
It really is. I do really appreciate the thread of knowing that there's money but not knowing where it's hidden, and then the reveal at night when she's cutting the dollar bills, and seeing the dollar bills blown by the wind past Robert Mitchum's feet, but it's dark so he doesn't see it. Like there's just a lot to love in this picture. I guess I'm just looking for the area to have a conversation about, maybe a weakness.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. I think the style just hooked me, transcended that, I guess, but understandable. I particularly liked the mother character played by Shirley Winters. Did you have a response one way or the other?
Yeah, I at first was confused at my own magnetism toward her, is the only way that I became aware while watching that I was very drawn to her as a performer. And as it continued, I was just kind of fascinated by that. There's certain stars that just have the it factor. You know, we recently talked about Julia Roberts. I wouldn't liken her to a Julia Roberts, but there's something about the it factor and the magnetism that's similar there. And, I mean, gosh, seeing her corpse at the bottom of that pool in the car is one of the most distinctive pieces of cinema that I can think. Like, that is Sunset Boulevard, Vertigo, Clock Tower memorable. The quality of lighting, the cleanness and clearness of that shot, the cleanness of the water. What a memorable scene.
Oh yeah, I feel like that there are many images that just kind of get seared in your memory. That's definitely one of them for sure. I love the scene where she's just found out, or essentially just figured out who exactly he is and why he's there, and she sort of just in that like somnambulent state just kind of accepts that she's about to be murdered, and that she looked like she's already laying in a coffin or something like that. I think that was just, I don't know, this is from 1955. I get that some people just can't get past the craft of old movies and whatever, but for me that was like deeply troubling to see someone just so acceptant of their fate in a situation like that. I thought that was quite unsettling, since this is so much about his ability to persuade people for people to kind of fall under his spell, and to see her just lie down and take it in that kind of like cathedral of a little house was very troubling.
Yes, I think that didn't bother me so much as the entire arc building up to that, in which he shames her for on her wedding night wanting to have sex with him. And
also very troubling.
Just the entire religious hierarchical takeover of her freedom of choice and agency. That stuff just bothers me. And in this film, it delivered on my instincts of being bothered by that.
Very troubling. Having her size herself up in the mirror, the shaming of it, it's bad. It's tough. It's tough to watch. Agreed.
Yes. You mentioned the cathedral likeness of the house. I do think that if I had to say the second most memorable scene, and there's a lot of them, but I don't know that I would pick one, but in general, the camera on the far side of that top level, when you see the triangle and the lighting and just the entire room and the staging, that sequence is so sumptuous and elegant and just entire. It's lit perfectly, it's framed perfectly, the staging is it's just one of those perfect sequences whenever that upper portion appears from that far pan side.
Yeah, very effective stuff. That was just where my mind went looking at that triangle, which is just so striking that it just felt like this is what he sees as his church. He is the preacher of this establishment. Very, very unsettling. But yeah, shot wise, I also love the kids in like a barn or something like that.
That's
right?
The other one that gets in the way, right? Is thinking about them in the barn, Pearl laying down sleeping, him, I believe sitting and looking out the window, and eventually we see Robert Mitchum ride by. But just that entire sequence is just one of those things that sits with you.
Yeah, I don't know if it's in that scene. I want to say it is, but that's, I think, where the boy says something like, doesn't this guy ever sleep, or something like that.
Yes, that's exactly what he says when he's singing on the far side.
Yeah, that just felt particularly nightmare-like to me, the idea of just a sort of endless chase being sought after by evil incarnate just feels like a particularly nightmare-like fear. Very, very effective.
It does. You're right. It does go from a point of feeling like a nightmare or near a nightmare. Particularly, I think the most key sequence there is the underwater shot of her dead body.
For sure.
And maybe beginning the transition to fairy tale, or at least in cementing the nightmare. I don't know which. I don't feel comfortable making that like a assertion. But that is definitely like the crucial event in that transition. But somewhere along that journey, it does begin that fairy tale feel, and it's not just the barn. It's absolutely everything to do with the close-ups of the animals and the quietness of the babbling river, and just the continuance of that and the repetition. That, that is what fairy tales are, the repetition in their journey.
Yeah. I still don't know that I know what to make of the animals necessarily. I enjoyed that sequence, but just the quickness with which it goes from that feeling like they're being chased to this very peaceful kind of moment just seems to suggest how fine that line between a dream and a nightmare can be, and how those can just so seamlessly fall from one to the other. Just struck me, I guess. But I don't know that I have a reading on the animals.
Yeah, I don't think you're supposed to. I think that it does two things, right? It exemplifies the beauty of America, and secondly, it just shows you the beauty of that countryside within this narrative. That there's a dead body of their mother in the water in a piece of technology. There's a drunk man who's the only guy that he can trust in town, passed out in his houseboat because he found the body and thinks that he's going to be blamed if he says anything. And then around them on this riverbank is all this beauty. And at the bottom of that river is their dead mother. I think that it's a contrast purpose in the book. I don't think that it's an objective point. In the film, I don't know if it was in the book, but to me, it's just about the contrast of the river of life.
Yeah, just the idyllicness of the countryside being tarnished by this evil. This is the goodness of it.
Yeah, I don't know. That seems a little bit, for me, that has a little bit too much angle on it. I don't know that I would say that the purpose is to show you the evilness, or because maybe the purpose is to show you the beauty.
That's what I meant. Yeah, okay. Yeah. That was the point of contrast too.
Yes,
I'm repeating what you said. I agree.
Okay.
Final act with the Lillian Gish character.
Very engrossing. Very a very good time during the shootout sequence. As I mentioned, the Christmas scene was a little bit rich for me. That the hitting me over the head with the message, I never respond well to that when the movie's over and you tack on the final scene to make sure that I got the message, because I just never like that stuff. I don't know if that was part of the book or not.
Yeah, that is certainly the most jarring tonal shift. That is an awfully cheery note to end things on after quite the dangerous journey these kids have been on.
I was content to have it end when he gives the money up, beating Robert Mitchum.
Yeah. I think it works. I agree. I can fully understand that complaint. It works for me only because it's been so surreal up until that point that it just feels like another sort of shift in mood that just feels like how dreams can work. They can be terrible until they're not. And just the strangeness of that I find in itself kind of appealing, but that I think is sensibility related.
Yeah. I guess we're at that crucial time. What's your favorite scene?
Well, I think my favorite shot is probably from the barn that we've already talked about, of Mitchum riding up kind of over that hill. That's probably the one that is most seared in my mind and that I'll think of when I think of this movie. What about you?
That's tough. All right, I got to do part A, part B. So the one that I would have to say is my favorite shot is actually the opening sequence when he's arrested, and he has that interaction with his son and forces his son to agree to protect his sister no matter what, not tell anybody where the money is, all that stuff. Same goes for you, Pearl. I found that sequence to be essential, but also meticulous and believable, and one of those rare shots that's filled with melodrama but doesn't sour a film through its melodrama, and that just goes a long way for me. And part B, very quickly, is the underwater scene. When I saw it, I just thought you'd never been able to do this without Hitchcock's work, and I'm so glad that we have Hitchcock's work so that we have these underwater scenes from this period. It's just such a distinctive, beautiful, dreamlike shot there. So,
word. That was Night of the Hunter, and that's another one in the can.
Run! Go! Get to the chopper!
We have to go.
I'm coming with you.
That was brilliant.